Thank you so much for joining Dental Marketing Theory, a podcast by Gary Bird. In today's episode, Gary talks with Elliot Zibel, the co-founder and CEO of Select Dental. Gary and Elliot discuss his dental journey and how Select Dental has a different model than that of a traditional group practice. As always, please make sure to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment, as all of those things really help to get the word out about dental marketing theory. Hope you enjoy today's show.
All right, we are live. Elliot, so good to have you on today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we've been starting every show with the dental journey of how people got into the dental industry, and it's been really informative. So I'd love to hear about how you got into the dental industry and how you ended up running the amazing DSO that you're running right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a bit of an unconventional story, but I started Select Dental Management in 2018, and I started Select with a friend of mine who I've known since I was 5 years old, my partner, Dr. Jonathan Mason. And the way that the idea to start Select came about was really through John's experience as a dentist and ultimately as an owner dentist. So in about 2015, John bought a dental practice. It was 5 ops and generating like around $800,000 in collections. I was with him 2 years later, and he had grown collections over 100% in less than 2 years, which was really fascinating to me how he was able to do that. When he told me more about how he grew the practice, it seemed like what he was doing was really replicable and scalable to other practices. And it also is interesting that he while he was doing great, growing the practice, there was a lot of challenges from managing the practice that were really impacting his work-life balance. And so, prior to that, I had experience as an institutional investor and entrepreneur, and the light bulb went off, and I said, hey, maybe there's a way we could, replicate this, growth and improvement model with other practices, and we could really help not only improve quality of care and practice performance, but also, work-life balance for the doctors.
That's amazing. So you didn't have any dental experience before that?
Nothing. No. And then
that's
and
2000.
there,
so that was just 4 years ago. So 5 years ago, no dental experience.
Yeah. No dental experience.
That's
so,
crazy.
But I always say it's like, dentists are like, how do you know so much about this or that? And I'm like, but I don't know how to place a crown. But my background and my training is in business analysis and industry analysis.
Yes.
So, it's no different than doctors being really good at placing crowns. My core competency is analyzing companies. And from there, I think what John and I did is really look at the entire industry. We got a lot of data and information, met a lot of the CEOs of some of the larger groups, and the industry is very forthcoming with information, as I'm sure you know. And I think we educated ourselves and really figured out what we wanted to be when we grew up, and we launched Select. That was the summer of 2017 when John and I had that conversation. I left my job 3 months later to start Select, and we started the business in January and did our first acquisition in February of 18. So less than 6 months.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So January 2018, and fast forward to where we're at now. What happened over these last 4 years? What did that growth look like? What did it feel like?
A lot's happened over the last 4 years. I don't think we have enough time to review that on this call, but I think what's happened is that we decided, based on the research that we did on the industry, what I and John realized was that if you looked at the best performing groups, and by best performing to me, that really means the ability to drive organic growth post acquisition. It's great to acquire practices. Oh, how many practices do you have? 20, 30, whatever. But if you're not adding value and you're not able to improve that asset, in my mind, putting on my investor hat for a minute, that's not really value creative. And it's not, something that is really exciting over the long term. And so when we looked at groups that had success in growing post-acquisition or affiliation, the common denominator we found was doctor retention rates were very high. And when we looked at groups that struggled to grow or to sustain, the issue is doctor retention. And so what we did was, we really focused, and we call ourselves a dental partnership organization, right? We don't call
Yeah.
ourselves a DSO because in our model, we thought really hard about what do doctors want, right? And how do we actually become very much doctor centric and partners to these doctors. And one of the most important decisions we made early on is that our model would be one where doctors retain economic ownership that are transitioning or more experienced, but we also give doctors, younger doctors, the opportunity to become owners as well. And to me, that's the ultimate alignment tool. And that is the ultimate way to obviously drive retention, is to have owners and partners. And then it's really a matter of focusing on making sure you have the right partners where there's shared vision and values. And so that's really the path we've gone down. And I think ever since we sort of formalized, what we call now a people-centric partnership model, right? Which is, our role is not to micromanage, your day-to-day decisions. Our role is to preserve the identity of what you've built and to collaboratively work to grow it and expand it. Ever since we sort of made that value proposition, I think, a little bit more clear, that really drove a lot of growth in our business, because people were afraid of the idea of, I don't want to sell and then lose all control and have my practice be another name and not recognizable. I want to ensure that what I've built is maintained. And so that really allowed us to go from, originally year one, we had 4 practices. I think prior to COVID, we were at 8, and now we sit at 40 practices in 8 states, and we support over 125 doctors. So it's not been as easy as that story will sound, and we'll certainly talk about that. But that's where we sit today, and I think, from a demand perspective, we see probably adding, at least 2 practices a month for the foreseeable future.
That's awesome. So just so we're all on the same page, what I heard there was, you just broke it down really simply. Doctors' retention is what maintains growth. That's how you can tell the practice is healthy. That feeds into all the other metrics behind that. And so that was the number one thing you were looking for. So you said, how can we maintain doctor retention? And then it's just giving them a piece of the pie, right? You're giving them a buy-in on at the higher level of what you guys are building, or is it down on the local level, or how are you getting that buy-in?
Yeah, I think, the ownership is a critical part of it, but it's also the values and the vision that you have as an organization. And I think that's something that, day one, we weren't being clear about, but what we really, if you look, and I have this, what do doctors want? They want clinical autonomy. They want continuing education and mentorship. They want to make a good living. They want work-life balance. What do they not want? They don't want to deal with like HR and all the other stuff that, marketing, there's things that sometimes they want to deal with marketing, but there's a lot of things that they don't want to deal with. And so I think what we've really tried to do is make sure that we're providing and investing in those key functions of continuing education, mentorship, training, development, and really getting that component of it right. And then I think the other component, that it sounds really simple, and it is simple, but is really truly being patient-centric as well. Because the doctors we partner with, if you ask them how they built their practice, is all treating patients like they treat their family. So every single day, though, we're being challenged, our values are being challenged by the questions that are asked and the decisions we make. Hey, can we make this investment for this patient? Can we write this off? Can we get this piece of equipment? And the way we all react to that really sets the precedent for how people believe or not that we're actually true to our values. And I think, we made a lot of mistakes over time for sure. But I would say we'll never make a mistake ever on compromising patient care or outcomes for patients based on, financials. We really have been really strong with that. And I think, combining that ownership with that true doctor focus on development. Also, we're starting mastermind groups and different ways to drive collaboration. And then also, most importantly, making sure that they have that clinical autonomy. Plus, we're supporting them in a way that actually improves care to patients. That it's more than just the ownership. The ownership is certainly a key component of it, but there's really a lot of focus around it. So it's a good question.
Yeah. So then from there, you said the main core value there is treating the patient like they're your family. So is that how you filter all of the decisions from your level down, or how do you, what values are you using to filter through those decisions?
Yeah, so we have a focus. We're an EOS company, and I know you are as well.
Yeah.
So what we're focused on, and this always changes, or maybe not always, but certainly changes from time to time. But we have an acronym we call like Dental WOW. The W stands for world class patient experience, and that means like exceeding expectations, right? And that's like those you go to the Four Seasons, and it's just that extra mile for service that we all recognize, right? So how do we do that? Every step of the patient journey, which we've identified 22 steps of that journey of from the time they go to your website, the time they call and they come in, and how are they greeted, and their walk back to the treatment room, so on and so forth. So that's the W. The O is really is oral systemic health. And I think, we are not like a fully integrated model. And I think it's really cool what some people are doing out there. But I think my perspective as a non-clinician is that I personally didn't understand the connection between your oral health and your systemic health. And I think, I think a lot of providers overestimate the dental IQ of their patients. And I think that, I try to reiterate to everyone, we understand that, we get how important this is. And everyone in the organization understands that, we're literally not just improving smiles, like we're literally saving lives with the care we're providing every day. And so that's sort of how we tie in the overall, focus on the patient, right, into that overall systemic health. And then the last W is winning world-class teams. Or winning teams, sorry. And the idea being like, we want to empower A+ teams to make, to have goals and to drive progress and improvement. And we want to, reward them as they grow and improve. So that's the way we sort of put brackets around, our model of being like, we're patient centric and focused, but we understand the oral systemic health connection, and we want great people to provide great care to our patients.
That's awesome. I love that framework. That's really, really helpful. I really like that 22 steps too. That's amazing that you've broken it down and you identified it, and you're probably going through each one of those and checking those out. But one thing that popped into my head as you were speaking was, so when you grow fast, it's fun, right? If you're an entrepreneur, you want to grow, right? And it's fun and it's exciting, but it can be extremely painful because you have to learn hard lessons really, really fast. But then looking back on it, you can go, man, I learned something that would normally take me 10 years to learn. I learned it in 6 months because you just covered so much ground. So compared to what you're doing now, you've obviously learned some things that have been really, really impactful, and now that are allowing you to have that sustainable growth where you're just like, hey, we're going to keep adding 2 practices every month for the foreseeable future. What were you doing before that really changed and you really learned from, like, man, I was doing that wrong and now we're doing it right, and that made a huge difference?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's huge challenges with scaling an organization, and no matter how well funded or well organized you are, there's challenges, right? It's easier to go slower. I think we all have different personality characteristics of, are we on a Colby, I'm like an 8.2, 8.3. So I'm like a fact finder, but also a quick start. And I think that's kind of how I've run our business. And I think, listen, I think honestly, there's times when my leadership team will say, hey man, like we have a 3-year goal. We met it in a year. That's cool to you, but like, we don't really have the resources, that's created problems for other people. So I think that, I think that putting together a strong leadership team and empowering people to have real input on strategic direction is critical. And I think once we sort of got that, and COVID honestly spurred that development, right? That's when we really implemented EOS and started focusing on priorities and having those honest conversations about, hey, these 7 things are just not working. We need to fix them. And I think once we kind of exercise that muscle of identifying issues and solving them, we were like off to the races, and we started just knocking off a lot of easy things. Now what happens is it's like, I would say it's like whack-a-mole. You got to kind of knock one down and another one pops up, and there's you're constantly readdressing what the barriers are, the issues are. But I think once you learn how to um, organize your company so there's clarity of vision and where you're headed, and you have the right people in the right seats, and you have a framework for solving problems, and you have your culture and values as your guiding focus, it just becomes easier, right? And so,
Yeah. Yep.
along the way, it's like, when do you bring on that chief operating officer? When do you bring on that marketing person? When you doing that, it's tricky to foresee the future, and sometimes you feel like you invested too early, and sometimes you feel like you invested too late. So it's a challenge to kind of get to homeostasis, which I don't think we're at, even now. But I think overall, you make mistakes, you learn from them, you solve problems, you systemize as much as you can, and most importantly, you get the right people in the right seats. I mean, having that A+ leadership team is is critical.
How have you developed that? I know that's something a lot of people are working on right now, is developing their leadership team. I know you said you did this over the pandemic, where you got alignment with your team. What tools or resources have you used outside of EOS to help you facilitate that?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think we've done a couple of programs, like going through John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, and really like dissecting each law, and really debating and kind of discussing that. We've got several people that are involved with the DEO, which is a great resource, and something that we really like, that provides a lot of leadership resources. But quite honestly, developing that leadership program is something that I'd like to be able to invest more time and resource to in the near term. So it's really been a exercise in learning by doing, and I think that my leadership team has stepped up, and they believe in what we're doing, and I always, one of the things that I took away from the John Maxwell's book was, like, it was my favorite quote on leadership. Like, leadership is influence, right? So it's all about, like, I have authority as the CEO of Select, but doesn't mean I'm a leader, right? Leadership means that people want to follow you. They want to do what you ask them to do because they trust you, they believe in you. And I think we have a good group of people that have been able to, through their actions and execution and values and so on, have been able to engender that type of loyalty. Now the challenge for us is, honestly, how do we develop that next layer of leaders and empower them? Because we're all trying to continue to take things off our plate that others can do, and really focus on things we really like, and that maybe others can't.
So is that like middle? Is that more like middle management, or like regional managers, things like that?
Correct. And even within our practices, that term middle management is something we actually use, because in our model, we've got practice leaders, or we call them leaders, not office managers, because yes, their duties, they're expected to do everything an office manager does, but they're also expected to be leaders, meaning they're supposed to influence and develop and think more strategically. And so even in that system, though, you can't have one practice leader accountable for everything in the practice. That's impossible. So even in our practices, we have a system called middle management accountability, where there's someone that's in charge of the restorative department. There's someone that's accountable for hygiene. There's someone who's accountable for hygiene reactivation. There's someone accountable for marketing. And there's someone accountable for treatment plan reactivation. And there's accountability metrics around all of those things, as well as development and training on how to kind of manage that. So I think middle management at the practice level, middle management and empowerment, at the regional leader, support revenue cycle management. We have a plethora of resources that support our practices is critical, and it's something I think we're definitely not perfect on, and we're working to improve on.
Love that. So how do you said something there that you're allowing them to lead. So how do you know from your level when someone's doing a good job at the office level? What metrics, or what are you looking at to know, hey, we're doing a great job? Not just, obviously, yeah, we collected the money, or yes, we did the dentistry, but also the team's buying in, all those other things that play into that.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. So I think we have the ways we define success, and those are patient satisfaction, active patient growth, employee engagement, satisfaction, um, collections growth, and profitability. Those are the quantitative ways that we sort of evaluate our practices. And then there's really a question about, leadership capacity. And actually, I just hired a new chief operating officer yesterday, and we were actually just talking about this. But I think the idea is to see, okay, who's performing well and who has the capacity to lead, right? And evaluating that capacity for leadership. And we've been talking a lot about, developing those people, even if we don't have a regional leader role, available. How do we put these people through training programs and let them grow and develop additional skill sets so that they can be, satisfied that they're getting what they want out of this relationship. Yep. And then when those opportunities present, whether it's another practice or a group of practices, we have the talent pool ready to go. So I think it's really, that's really driven more by the regional leaders and their assessment of, practice performance and leadership. We also have operational evaluations that we do quarterly that are like 100 questions roughly that go through like, okay, we define like what are the core things you need to have a successful practice. For us, it's leadership is one of them. So we're going to say like, is there a clinical leader and a non-clinical leader? Are they communicating? Are there morning huddles? Are there goals? Is there, clarity around?
So like peer evaluation, basically.
Yeah. And right now, interestingly, we're doing it. The regionals are doing it, but what we want to do is push it down to the practices so they can do it themselves.
Yeah, smart.
Not so much that like, okay, we're evaluating you. Like you evaluate yourself. No. Like, and then the idea what happens is then that spits out, there's answers to those questions, and then you get a spit out that says a report that says, okay, here's where you ranked yourself based on the responses. You're a 68% in leadership. You're a 82% in treatment plan presentation. You're, and then it kind of gives us a focus of like, okay, where do we focus? And then we update that quarterly to see, okay, hey, analytically, have we improved on that area of focus? So I think it's something that we're, again, fast growth. You can't do everything all at once, but I think we're at the stage where we're really focused on, to your point, like that development and identification of, people that can move upwardly. Before it was easy. I saw everyone. I honestly knew everyone. So I promoted people. I was like, wow, they're great.
They're really good. Yeah.
But now we're big enough where I can't do that. And I think it's really important that there's, opportunities for growth in the organization. I'd say about half of our, management team has been, put in place through internal promotions, and about a third have been referrals, and then the third have been, external. So I think it's really important if you can have that continuity and that upward mobility. It's a great thing to have.
Oh, it's huge. It saves you money. It allows you to move faster. You retain corporate knowledge, right? Other people get excited because they're like, "Hey, my friend got promoted. I can get promoted too." So yeah, it's definitely if you can do that, it's a win for everybody across the board.
Totally.
So you said something. You said if they have the capacity of leadership. I know some traps that people fall into. I've done it countless times where it's like you're really good at this job. So we're going to move you to leadership because you're the best salesperson. So you're going to be head of sales. Well, You did two things there. Number one, you just lost your best salesperson. And number two, you put somebody in a leadership position that may not be a leader. So how do you have a system to calibrate for they have the capacity to lead yet? Have you developed that? Or how are you looking at that component?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Actually, it hits home because my wife is a exceptional salesperson, and they keep trying to push. And she did management once. She hated it. She's like, I want to own my own relationships and and be able to be accountable to myself. I don't want to have to deal with all these other things. And so I totally get that and agree with that. I think the move from like a non-practice leader to practice leader, and then is maybe one where there's more question around like, do you have the personality, the ability to influence and manage? And then the move from the practice leader to the regional leader, I think is honestly a little bit of an easier transition. If you're successful and you're really leading right in that practice and you're owning it, I think the question becomes, can you do that at scale? Can we give you the resources to do that at scale? And can we teach you how to be more strategic and less task oriented? Right. So we don't have like we don't do like a Colby test, or we're not, again, if we're not that sophisticated, honestly, in this area yet, where we can say, oh, wow, Gary's got the aptitude. And it's more like old school, like, hey, Mary's doing a great job and she's motivated and everyone likes her. And, we want to give her that shot and make sure that she's trained and can be successful. But it's really more of like, when you see it at the practice level and you see it in the performance, in the leadership, it's then a matter of how do we actually just help that person scale. So we're not plucking people, and occasionally we're plucking people out of like an assistant role or something and, trying to see if they can be a leader. But, more often than not, it's more people that already have some level of leadership experience.
Got it. That's awesome. Oh, changing gears on you. So I know something you've mentioned several times, values, and we hear this a lot, like culture is super important. But as you know, and as we see out in the dental industry, a lot of times what happens is you'll have a great culture maybe at the DSO level, right? Which may be at an office somewhere. And then at the office level, it's like a dumpster fire going on, right? And it's like people are quitting and the people are mad. And so you have almost two cultures kind of living at the same time, and they're different. How do you guys solve for that? Because I know that that's something that's really important to you, is that you get everybody's buy-in and you get everybody on the same page. So how do you tackle that and approach that?
Yeah, I mean, it's I think by looking at really employee engagement, satisfaction, turnover rates of employees, you can start to identify where the problems are, and I think it's really all about having the right leadership. It goes back to leadership. Like in our model, if we have a great practice leader and clinical leader in place, like everything's great. If we have
even if you don't have systems, right? Like it's even like the leader systems, overcomes.
Doesn't matter. If we don't have the right practice leader in the right seat, we can't do anything. We are literally, fighting with two hands behind our back. And honestly, a lot of times, unfortunately, like the doctors should be the problem, right? They're our clinical leader and they're our partner, but maybe the way they're talking to people isn't positive, or they're not celebrating successes. So, I mean, at that point, it's really, a question of understanding, that there's a problem, trying to understand the root cause of it. And then really we do, and we've got some people specifically that are really good at creating solutions to these complicated issues. And a lot of it comes down to, very simply, which is also one of our core values, is communication, open and honest. What are the challenges? Can we create a safe space where people can say, hey, like, I don't like the way, I'm being treated in these scenarios. Can we create that feedback loop, which is not always easy, especially in an acquisition model. If you had a practice that's operating for 30 years a certain way, but it's hard to change that. But when we come in, it's like the floodgates open up. It's like whatever issues have been going on, it's like, here are all the issues. And the doctor often doesn't even know about them. So it's kind of what we do is we sit, we say, okay, hey, regional leader or practice leader, clinical leader, here are the issues that we've observed and we want to fix. And so here's how we're going to do it. We're going to set agreements for your team. You guys are going to do that, not us, about how we interact. We're going to create an open, environment where there's some cadence communication where we can talk about things. Because, I'll tell you, the correlation that I see between offices where there's issues and communication is like negative 100%. Oh, do you do morning huddles? No. Do you do monthly meetings? No. Do you do weekly meetings? No. Okay. Well, you've got a bunch of people that are upset about little things that don't have any forum to actually communicate it. No one's listening to their input. They're not able to improve anything. There you go. Right. So I think, just making sure that communication cadence and that framework for how we communicate is set up is critically important at the practice level. That's part of what we evaluate in our, our overall practice evaluations as well. And then, it's a little bit more. Some things are harder than others. Most times we could fix an issue. I had a call the other day, staff was upset with the doctors, how they were speaking to them and this and that. I got on the phone with the doctors. I laid it out for them. I said, here's how we're going to fix it. The next day, the doctors apologized to the team. We had a nice, communication session, created some regular cadence of processes to address any issues that come up. And, boom, it's like morale went from like terrible to amazing, overnight. Now, the problem is how do you sustain that? Right. And so, one of the other
Yeah.
laws of leadership from Maxwell's book is the law of momentum. And that's one we've felt a lot, right? When things are going well and everyone's kicking butt and you're kind of soaring, but that stops. It's not, it's gravity, right? It comes back down and you've got to build it back up. So it's like, do you have the understanding to know when you're losing momentum, and do you have the ability to kind of course correct? Is something I've learned in my organization is critical. And it's the same thing in our practices. People have a bad day, a bad situation happens, you got to be able to get past that and rebuild, momentum.
That's great. I love that. Some very practical things there. And I know they're very effective, because scaling culture is one of the difficult things. It's hard to do, especially when you're not in an office altogether. You're all spread apart. Where do you kind of see the future of dentistry heading? Obviously, there's consolidating happening. You're a good picture of that, but other people are buying practices. There's a shortage on talent, right? We don't have there's not as many, there's more patients than there are doctors to see them currently. We see the average time to appointment getting longer and longer and longer. What are your thoughts on the future of dentistry over the next 5 to 10 years? Where do you see things going?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's clearly been, even pre-COVID, acceleration in consolidation, and I think the driver of that is you're seeing some better models out there. It's like a DSO 2.0 model where some groups are able to add real value and also not impair the identity of that practice. And I think also it's just become more mainstream. And I think, clearly post-COVID, after everyone went through all those hardships, then you've seen a huge, increase in penetration. And obviously we've seen a lot of capital flow into dental and continue to flow into dental. So listen, I don't think it's rocket science. If you look still at dental penetration rates, we can argue what they look like, but 15 to 20%, of doctors are probably affiliated with a group. And I think, compare that to the internal medicine space, it's like 85%. Dermatology is higher. I mean, we're still in dental's a big market. It's going to take a long time to really consolidate. And so I think, the fight over time is not for patients as much as it is for doctors. There's plenty of patients out there. There's plenty of people like you that know how to get 100%. Those patients, right? The challenge is, are they coming in and leaving and not staying in our system? Or do we have anyone else to see them, right? Now, we're really focused on not just having a body. We want top 1% doctors. It's really competitive for those people. And I think that's a huge challenge. And I think we're all thinking about ways through student loan forgiveness programs and other things. Like, I had a doctor the other day, a large group is offering her $150,000, over 4 years to repay their debt. Like, that's a great idea. We should be doing that. Right. So, so I think that there's a lot of things that will be focused on. I think the groups that win are going to be the groups that attract and retain the best doctors, in my mind. And to that point, I do think, and I'm biased, obviously, but I think that the partnership models like ours, I'd like to say we invented it and we're the only group doing it. We're not. The partnership models are taking tremendous share. If you look at the consolidation, and I'll throw out like Guardian Dental, Lightwave, MB2, obviously, US Endo, US Oral Maxillofacial Surgery. I mean, those groups have grown tremendously over the last, 5 years. And why? It's because those partnership models have higher dentist retention rates, better organic growth, better patient retention rates. It goes back to what we were talking about prior. So, I mean, listen, everything tends to be cyclical, but I don't think this is. I think the idea that doctors that have alignment and ownership and having a partnership model where you're not micromanaging, field level decisions, to me, is a proven formula. And we've also seen in every industry that I've ever looked at that owners drive better execution than employees. Look at, I always use the example of like fast food restaurants. If you look at McDonald's, like 90% of their stores are franchised and 10% are owned, where they test things and whatever. Every quarter, almost every quarter, every year, better growth, better profitability, better morale at their franchise stores than company owned. And that's why all of these restaurants have moved to a franchise model. I think that in dentistry, it's sort of a similar dynamic of like, let's give them the ingredients, let's give them the recipes, but let's let them drive execution.
Yeah. And I really like the way that you're thinking, and you're spot on. What's interesting is that when the DSO model really started getting popular, right? It wasn't set up that way. It was set up, all the controls at the top. The doctors kind of come in, they're an employee. Here's your schedule, and I think that turned away a lot of doctors and turned
100%.
away a lot of people, obviously, and people started to pivot. And then people are like, well, no, the consolidation's still going to happen. It's going to happen like this. Because of other industries like optometry and things like that. So you think that dental is going to kind of do its own thing? Is that right? Like it's going to kind of become this hybrid consolidations, but doctors are still at the forefront of it? Or do you think that might pivot again and change again?
I mean, listen, I think that all of these groups I mentioned, including ourselves, are trying to figure out how do we have our cake and eat it too. So right now our doctor retention rate is above 90%, which is best in class.
Yeah.
Is it easier to standardize and make everything the same? 100%. We all know that.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a question of like, how do we preserve this value prop that is attractive and leading to good outcomes for us and for our partners?
Yeah.
But how do we also standardize as much as we can without, where's that line? I think we're all trying to figure that out. I think also that you're going to see the second layer of consolidation, and you started to see this a little bit of like, groups consolidating with groups. And I think what we're starting to see is like bigger groups that maybe have that more traditional model, adding this partnership model to their repertoire via acquisition and saying, hey, I'm not in this area. Okay. Let's buy this platform. We'll leverage our support infrastructure and we'll let them operate, in a semi-autonomous way. Again, everyone does things in a different way, and there's de novo models, and that's amazing. And I'm not smart enough to understand how to do that. It's probably like the best, growth strategy if you're good at it. There's different ways to skin a cat, but I think that, in the world that I live in, I'm seeing, really more consolidation to the partnership models. I'm seeing also consolidation amongst groups over the next several years, where you get the Heartlands and the bigger groups out there that are so big, like buying one practice is like almost irrelevant for some of them at this point, right? So I think, buying, and you've seen Heartland, they've probably done 10 group acquisitions in the past, 12 or 18 months. I think that you're going to see a lot of consolidation there. And I think that the question there will be, how do they successfully acquire practices or businesses and give them the support and the autonomy to continue to make sure they have that value proposition as strong as it is, today. No different than when you buy a practice and make sure that, you're preserving that identity. So I think there's gonna be a lot of consolidation, not just at the practice level, but in the groups as well.
I love it because the model that you guys are building is really, you guys love it. And I know it's harder for you guys because you can't systematize it as much, but you love it because you have doctor retention, which then feeds into all of any other statistic you want to lay out there. The doctors love it because they get to participate and they get to be an owner with you. And then it's best for the patients too, right? So, or at least it seems that way, because you're retaining more of your patients. You're keeping them. They're buying more dentistry. Their dental health, their dental IQ is going up. So it seems to be a win-win-win-win. And again, other industries haven't necessarily gone down that path in medical, but maybe dental is the one that does that. Why do you think dental is going to be the one that probably figures that out?
I mean, there's other there's vet models that have the same. I mean, there's definitely, I think, models in different industries. Optometry has the same. I mean, there's the biggest optometry group has the same model. Like, I think this is a fairly familiar playbook to a decent chunk of large equity groups. Like, I watched a presentation on like the Charles Bank, the people that invested in MB2, and they were looking for like this model, like a partnership model that can, that wasn't micromanaging practice level decisions, but could drive value creation, right? So I think that in the, especially for the smart private equity healthcare people that have been involved in different industries, like, this is not a foreign concept. This model works in every market. I think the interesting part of it is that, quite frankly, they can earn a better return. If they can do it without giving away ownership, they can actually earn a better return. And so, I think that there's always going to be different models, out there. And maybe it is somewhat cyclical, but I think if you talk about a dearth of talent, the importance of retention, and at least models like ours, I mean, we'll see. I think there's a lot of precedent in healthcare in general for this to work, but I think the legacy models weren't built that way. So I think it's going to take some time, to adjust for some of these partnership models to get to scale. Again, MB2 I think is 400 something practices, but I think they're the biggest partnership model out there. But I think it'll take some time for those groups, and even still, they're still not going to be the dominant percentage of the market. They're just going to take incremental share. So I don't know. It's interesting. I've never seen anyone dissect the market and say, hey, here's a partnership model, and I don't even know how you delineate that. But it'd be interesting
because everybody does it. Everybody does it a little bit different too, right? So
100%.
Everybody has a different flavor. So I think that's what makes it interesting. Last question for you. So where do you see Select going over the next 5 years? How do you see things playing out for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think what we're focused on is and honestly, this is a pivot a little bit for me, because it's super exciting how many practices do you have? 60. Wow, you're great, right? But again, I go back to the fact that it's really about the growth that you're able to drive at these practices post-affiliation. So, we're proud that for practices that have been with us for more than a year, we've driven 20% organic growth, at those practices. And that feels good.
That's awesome.
We're just scratching the surface. I think that there is a substantially amount of incremental value that we can add through better systems and processes. We've focused on a component of growth, but not, the other 7 or 8 opportunities that we have. And so, my goal is to really prove that, for us, is that we are the partner of choice for high quality doctors that care about their practices and their practice, their patients, their team members, want to see their legacy survive, but also are growth oriented and open to positive change in a collaborative way. And I think if we can continue to be driving great retention and to your point, that win-win-win-win, we have advocates that refer us practices, and we'll have plenty of growth opportunities. But I think the reality of it is we got to get our existing model even stronger to be able, because in our model, every practice is different. You got to have different ways you can drive growth. So I'm looking for that next opportunity, and I know what it is to be able to sustain growth over time. And so we're focused on just kind of perfecting that support model, making sure we have the right people in the right seats. It's a challenge. There's times where HR, we didn't have enough business support people, or we didn't have enough accounts payable people, and we started dropping the ball on some bills. So it's always a challenge to kind of right size that support infrastructure, at least for me. So it's really about right sizing that infrastructure, improving our partner satisfaction levels, and driving that organic growth. I think is really what we're focused on.
That's awesome. I always learn so much listening to you. You always break everything down to a very practical and easy level to understand and apply, which I really appreciate. It helps me think through different things that we're doing in our business. And I know that those that get to work with you are very fortunate, because you do put it in a way that is swallowable. So if someone wants to reach out to you and get a hold of you and talk to you about what you guys have going on, what's the best way to reach you?
Yeah, my email address, which is the longest email address in the world, I set up a while ago, is E Zibel. Last name is Z as in zebra, I as in igloo, B as in boy, E as in Edward, L as in Larry, and it's at Select Dental Management, completely spelled out, no shortcuts.com. And also I've set up on our website. When you hit contact, all of those go to me too. So that's grow at selectmanagement.com.
We'll put those down in every cut of this. We'll put it down below. So if you want to just click on it, you can get it. But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. You guys are doing a great job, and I can't wait to see what happens over the next couple of years with you guys.
Yeah. Same to you. Thanks for having me, Gary.